So now back to breaking the habit. So today I want to focus on two areas that very often go undetected when it comes to compulsive behavior or obsession, and those are love and money. The reason I'm mentioning these two is because they go undetected, and because we think of it in various different ways. Um, the, the likelihood of us breaking the patterns around, or the unhealthy patterns around love and money, become very, very challenging. And one of the things that addicts discover is that as they go through recovery, as they gain more and more clean time, that there are either other addictions that they latch onto, or if they're working a solid program, then underlying addictions that now rise to the surface. And very often this is around love and money. So what I'd like to do is go through some of the symptoms of sex and love addiction, and the symptoms around under-earning. The other reason I've chosen these topics is that given that we're in the month of Ramadan and that we're in lockdown, it strikes me as an opportune time really for us to purge, for us to let go of relationships that aren't really working for us, and for us to use this again as an opportunity to draw closer to Allah. So with the love addiction and with under earning, some of the ways in which to understand it is, if you think about love addiction, not as love addiction, because that's often the term isn't too pleasant to hear or to think about, but rather as emotional dependency, right? That spin on the term makes a lot more sense, and one that's potentially easier to resonate with. That really what we're doing is outsourcing our emotional needs to others to the point where we are completely dependent on them, right? And so it makes us behave in all sorts of erratic ways. The characteristics that I'm about to read off, we find on the AA, which is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous site. There are various versions of fellowships around this topic. So you'll have SAA, which is Sex Addicts, then SLAA, Sex and Love Addicts, and then you also have LAA, right? I've chosen the combination of the two because it kind of picks up on both. So the first one, having few healthy boundaries, we became sexually involved with and or emotionally attached to people without knowing them. And so if you think about someone who rushes into relationships, and I'm mentioning these characteristics because while it may not be yours, you may know a friend or may have a family member who displays some of these behaviors, and so the encouragement obviously is to spread the word and to perhaps give you a little bit of a better understanding as to what they're going through and why they might be behaving the way that they're behaving. Fearing abandonment and loneliness, we stay in and return to painful, destructive relationships, concealing our dependency needs from ourselves and others, growing more isolated and alienated from friends and loved ones, ourselves and God. So if you think about someone who is constantly, or a couple rather, where they're constantly breaking up and making up, breaking up and making up, breaking up and making up. Right? 1 week they're on, the next week they're off, and then they're back on, and then they're off. And the uh, the pattern of behavior here is really to manage that those needs of emotional dependency and that experience of not being completely abandoned. The problem with it is simply that usually there's a level of toxicity or dysfunction that doesn't allow them to either, right? And so you can have someone that feels, desperately in need of love, and then when they start receiving it, start pushing their partner away because I don't deserve it. So just because they want it doesn't mean they're going to accept it, because the whole idea of am I good enough, not good enough, etc., etc. Those things all come into play. Right? That's the second characteristic. Also, as part of it, one of the things that happens when we're in a relationship like that is those who support us find it increasingly hard to continue to do so, because we are, for instance, I read this quote the other day that just summed it up so nicely. It's supposedly from a mother to her daughter, saying that don't complain to your husband about me, because I love you in a way that means I'll rally for you, I'll be behind you, I will back you, and it will change my opinion of him. And then later on, when you guys make up, my opinion of him won't have changed because of how he hurt you, right? And this is so true for many of us. We have a friend, and the friend is hurt by their significant other, right? And then, as loyal friends do, right? And I'm not saying it's healthy or unhealthy, just as the story usually goes, we back our friend, right? And we support them. And sometimes, we'll go as far as saying, oh, if you don't like them, then I don't like them either, right? And so it changes us. It changes the relationships that we have with the couple, with the various people in the couple. And then chances are they make up again. But now you have all this resentment in your heart. You have all this ill feeling that you have towards that person. And let's say you find it within yourself to cleanse that. Say, you know what, okay, I'm going to give him a second chance. Then they're going to break up again. And then, where does that leave you? Again, the supportive friend, perhaps a bit cautious about, supporting blindly, but it's going to happen. And, ultimately, especially when it's an abusive relationship, where there's an abuse on top of this dysfunctionality, right? At some point, those that love you and those that support you, they start losing hope. They're just like, why should I say anything or do anything? This person is just going to continue to do whatever the heck they want to do. And so, you'll find that some people, and it can seem cold, they don't intervene. They're just going to, if they're having problems, let them have problems. Let them figure it out. Because at the end of the day, this is in fact how some couples bond. Like they have some version of a trauma bond where there's a shared hatred for someone, right? And so they can connect around all sorts of different things, and there's no telling when they're going to be together, when they're not going to be together. And in terms of our ability to maintain relationships with people, that then it erodes. And so if you find yourself in a relationship like this, then chances are you're going to want to alienate yourself from your friends, from your loved ones, because they're going to keep asking you, why do you keep going back to him, or why do you keep going back to her, or she's such a terrible person, or he is such a bad guy, or they're going to share their opinions. And these opinions, if it's during a time when you're on the outs, then great, you're going to be like, yeah, no, absolutely, 100%, I'm so glad you're here for me. But if it's during a time when you want to mend fences with your partner, you're going to experience it as like, no, but you guys don't understand, and you'll try and justify and rationalize and that kind of thing, and it just becomes too emotionally draining. And so the easier route is simply that we start to alienate ourselves from people, because why do we need them? Why must we hear from them? The problem is that it then actually locks us deeper into the relationship, because we've now experienced abandonment from so many others, right? And then ultimately from ourselves as well, ourselves and God, because when we make up and break up, we are at times honoring different parts of ourselves. So it depends why we're getting into the relationship, right? So if it's out of a need for emotions, then that's one thing. If it's out of a need for sex, then it's another thing. And these can make us feel any number of different ways. You find very often like a woman will feel completely betrayed by herself, because she may see herself as supposed to be empowered, or supposed to be independent, or supposed to be a feminist, and now is going back and forth like like someone without direction, and someone who's less than or incapable of taking care of themselves. And so they start to dissociate in that they just can't deal with seeing themselves in that way, so they disconnect from themselves. And then we can, especially if we're attributing the bad of this to Allah, like why can't Allah just why can't God just fix our relationship? Why can't He just place more love and mercy between us? Why can't He just make us feel better about each other? Then we start to have ill feeling towards our high power. Fearing emotional and or sexual deprivation, we compulsively pursue and involve ourselves in one relationship after another, sometimes having more than one sexual or emotional liaison at a time. And so this may happen in various ways. This could be through having someone on the side. It could be you may be in a committed relationship, but then engaging either sexually or even just emotionally. Generally, or more, I suppose at this point it's more analogous than anything. We find that in terms of the stepping out or the infidelity part of it, right? It's tricky ground, because of how Western society has colored what a relationship is. When we think about things from an Islamic point of view, there are very clear guidelines as to what is permitted and what's not permitted, right? But when we entertain Western ideas of but we're just friends, or we work colleagues, or we this or we that, there's all these gray areas in which relationships can form and can bloom. And so you find that many cases of infidelity happen between co-workers, right? And why wouldn't it? If you think about it, you spend the majority of your day with that person. You also spend the majority of your day, in terms of your appearance, the best version of yourself that person gets to see, right? Like when we are home, we're not all dressed up, 3-piece suit, that kind of thing, right? But when we're out at work, then we're looking our best, we're looking sharp, we're well groomed, and whatnot. When we get home, we throw on a tracksuit or a t-shirt, or we take off our makeup or our underwear, whatever it is. We just want to get comfortable, and so our partners don't necessarily get to enjoy that best version of ourselves. So perhaps they even sort of lose interest, or aren't as enamored as what a co-worker might be, right? And so they see the best version of ourselves, not just physically, but also in terms of how we function, and this is an important concept, because when we talk about functioning, if you think about one of the things that's often described as sexy, right? People say that confidence is sexy, right? We're usually most confident at the thing that we're doing the most, because confidence is a byproduct of practice, of repetition, right? And so if ever we were to take our entire day and look at where are we confident, more likely than not it's going to show up at work, right? At home we're needy, and we are miserable, and we're trying to cope with the stress of our bills, and what it took for us to be functional at work, and kids running around, and trying to still maintain a marriage, and so it's not necessarily, we're not necessarily in our best space emotionally at home, right? And so lots of affairs happen, at work. With the advent of technology and social media and that kind of thing, right? What we found is that generally men tend towards pornography or an actual physical sexual relationship, right? It depends on the arousal template. On the flip side, women tend more towards what you could consider perhaps emotional infidelity. And so this would take place usually through either just bearing feelings for someone else internally, right, or forming a relationship, but one that's more emotional than it is physical. And so it's perhaps through email or text or whatever, social media, Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever, right? But that's the one that women tend to fall prey to a little bit more, simply because there's more of an emotional need that gets met over there, right? And we find that generally men are pursuing sex while women pursue emotional connection, right? And it's not to say that there isn't an overlap, right? Especially in the line of work that I do, I find I've met many female sex addicts who aren't in fact pursuing an emotional thing. So just because it's more prevalent doesn't mean it's the rule for everyone, right? We confuse love with neediness, physical and sexual attraction, pity, and or the need to rescue or be rescued. And so sometimes when we feel needed, or we see someone in need, then we start to experience emotions that may feel like love. So when we're helping someone out, sort of like the knight in shining armor and the damsel in distress, right? We can bond around that experience and being taken care of, rescuing, that kind of thing. But it's not necessarily love. It can though feel like that, right? We feel empty and incomplete when we are alone. Even though we fear intimacy and commitment, we continually search for relationships and sexual contacts. And so this, we see some version of it with online relationships, where someone will have like multiple people that they're chatting to, right? So if it was really that we were lonely, or that we needed someone, then one person would suffice. But generally, what you find is that in the absence of an actual commitment, sometimes even when there is a commitment, there's still, especially when the behavior is compulsive, there's still that constant engaging in communication with others, right? And so it'll be like multiple contacts that you're chatting to, perhaps various ones that you're pursuing a physical relationship as well. It doesn't mean it's necessarily physical, but especially with technology, it escalates in a very strange way, because 1 minute you can be friends and just chatting, the next they can be flirting, and then it can escalate in tiny little increments, because the difference between a selfie and a sext, the line is so thin there, right? And especially when you consider what people are posting like on social media, the lines become very, very blurred, because you could say, well, I've sent this, but it's also on my Instagram, and so am I really flirting with that person, or is it any more than they've already shown the rest of the world? And so there's all these little gray areas which we can fall, prey to. We feel, so we feel empty and complete. We sexualize stress, guilt, loneliness, anger, shame, fear, and envy. We use sex or emotional dependence as substitutes for nurturing care and support. So this really speaks to why we're now engaging in, compulsive romantic relationships or sexual relationships, in that we're really turning our emotions, we're sexualizing our emotions and making it so that the solution to whatever we feel is sex or love, right? Depending again on your particular template. And so, feeling needy, reach out for a booty call, or reach out for some comforting text or conversation. And that can happen with whether you're needy, whether you're angry, whether you're lonely, whether you're hurt, whether you're happy, whether you're sad. It's just an inability within ourselves to comfort ourselves, to even celebrate. So whether the emotion is positive or negative is irrelevant. We continuously use the other person or the relationship to manage that emotion. We use sex and emotional involvement to manipulate and control others. We become immobilized or seriously distracted by romantic and or sexual obsessions or fantasies. So here it could be like, daydreaming about someone means that you're not functioning at work, or even, just constantly checking their Facebook and their Instagram, or, stalking them online in whatever form. Simon Sinek did a little segment, and he speaks about how people work and how they use technology, and how the older generation in the office usually have their cell phones to the side, and so computer here, cell phone over there, and they're working with their screen, they're typing and they're looking over here, whereas the younger generation have the screen, keyboard, and then phone right in front of them, usually tilted up so that they can see what's happening. And so they might be typing and then typing here on the phone, and then checking for updates, looking over here, having multiple windows open, and now you have like WhatsApp web, where you can WhatsApp from your PC. So to have that sort of running in the background, it's a huge distraction, because you can't give your work or whatever it is that you're doing your full attention, because you're constantly going to hear a ping or receive a notification or see a chat pop up somewhere, and now we have notifications for like all our apps. Someone tags you on Instagram, you get a notification. Someone comments something on Facebook, you get a notification. However many likes, every time you get a like, you get a notification, right? So if you post something on Facebook and Instagram, and share something on WhatsApp, chances are you're going to get like easily 100 notifications, right? And how does this affect your ability to function? Right. Then we avoid responsibility for ourselves by attaching ourselves to people who are emotionally unavailable. Right? And so this is a version of sex and love addiction isn't necessarily always being actually in the relationship. It can even be obsessing about someone that's unavailable to you. So if you think about like obsessing over an ex, the ex is potentially even moved on, but you're still in your mind thinking about how can I win them back, and maybe I just need to work it out, maybe the relationship won't work out, that kind of thing. We stay enslaved to emotional dependency, romantic intrigue, or compulsive sexual activities. And here, this is tricky as well, because when you think of emotional dependency, it's really that we actually classify ourselves as emotionally dependent on someone, right? But if you think about the idea of, if I leave this relationship, then I'm going to be alone, that's a version of emotional dependence, right? Because now you're staying in the relationship simply so that you don't feel lonely, right? It could also be because of like a romantic intrigue. So you meet someone and for the most part, you know that this isn't necessarily a healthy relationship, but you just can't say no because, wow, they are like intriguing. Maybe they're mysterious. Maybe they, just excite you in a way that, you wouldn't necessarily allow yourself to be excited. I had a client not too long ago who mentioned that she has absolutely no interest in the guy who's currently pursuing her, but just can't seem to stop talking to him. There's something about him. She's 110% certain she doesn't want to marry the guy, but that doesn't change the fact that she's still continuing to chat to him. And one of the things that we discussed was perhaps that's driven by loneliness, right? Another was that he is a safe bet because he is unavailable. She feels safer talking to someone that she thinks in her mind she'll never commit to. So it's a version of being engaged in a relationship to a certain extent. So getting like just a little bit of a hit in terms of the adoration, in terms of the company, the companionship, maybe there's a bit of romance, there can even be like sexual arousal in it, depending on like the nature of the relationship or the nature of the chats or whatever. And so we can get like small doses of what we want from a relationship from someone that we don't necessarily want to be in a relationship with, right? But it's enough to keep us going. It's enough to sustain us. To avoid feeling vulnerable, we may retreat from all intimate involvement, mistaking sexual and emotional anorexia for recovery. So this is the flip side of it, right? Where instead of being compulsively engaged in a relationship, we now say, you know what? No more. I'm taking sort of a vow of celibacy. I'm giving myself a year off, right? No dating, no chatting, no this, no that, whatever. And some people do it as sort of a spiritual exercise, right? But in another way, you could consider it white knuckling. That really you are exhibiting simply the behavior that's on the flip side of the coin. So much like you have compulsive overeating, you also have anorexia, neither of them being particularly healthy. The bottom line here being that at no point are you learning about or developing a healthy relationship. At no point are you confronting what are the underlying patterns behind why you get into relationships, why they become compulsive, why you behave the way you do when you're in a relationship. We assign, this one is like especially important, we assign magical qualities to others. We idealize and pursue them, then blame them for not fulfilling our fantasies and our expectations. This one is just so rife, especially in sort of the younger generation. And so the desire to be married means that more often than not we overlook, and I'm speaking about this relative to the Muslim community because generally you'll find that there's a greater pressure in the Muslim community for the young generation to get married rather than to be dating and just finding their way that way, right? So the needs, be it physical or emotional, sexual, whatever it is, right? They can be very compelling, and so as a way out of or as a release from those needs, we allow ourselves to engage in a relationship. Now the problem is that we may recognize that this person isn't actually right for us, right? I met someone not long ago. He draws up a list of things that he's looking for in a spouse because he has someone in mind, right? Now the problem here is already the ship is too far gone, because when you have someone in mind, on some level you've already created an attachment, even if you've just seen them. How many relationships didn't start simply with a gaze? And so that gaze alone, and that's why Ghazali speaks about protecting your gaze, because it's a pathway to the heart. It places a seed in the heart, and so you see that person, you're like, wow, what a smile, oh, that's just like wow, so beautiful. Now already hooked. There's already a part of you that inclines to that person. You know nothing else about that person except the way that they've smiled. Right? They didn't even have to smile at you. Right? So what happens is we identify a characteristic, right? And we latch onto it. We're like, oh no, this is just an amazing person. But now, if you already developed feelings for the person, then to at this point draw up a list means that the list is going to be biased. So anyway, the guy draws up the list and he says, wow, this person meets all of my criteria. Oh my word, this is incredible, right? And why wouldn't it be, right? His criteria is supposed to help him decide if he should pursue it or not. But there's a part of his heart that's already attached, and so it's clouded his thinking in what he's put down. So he goes around, he starts making mashura, and he's speaking, and then he says, you know what? I need to revise my list. I didn't think about some things. So he revises the list, only to discover this person only meets 3 of the qualities. This was devastating, because a moment ago she was the perfect one, she was the one, and now nowhere near it. Like 3 out of the 10 qualities. So anyway, a little bit of time goes by. Next thing I know, the guy's getting married to her. How did that happen? Her qualities didn't change, his list didn't change. But within himself, his perception of her had changed. And so all of a sudden, through some mental gymnastics, she now meets all 10 of the criteria. So what we're attributing it to here is an idealizing of a person. We tell ourselves that, you know what, they will change, and I've seen them change, and they will, become more pious. I can help them be more this or more that, and so we create all these ideals, and we cause it so that the other person actually has to bear the brunt of our ideals, and then we pursue them, because now in our minds they're perfect, right? They aren't actually. It's just we've changed the way that we looked at them. So now we're looking through rose-tinted glasses, and then we expect them to be all rosy. When we're in the relationship, obviously, the relationship becomes disillusioning, and so it's completely, it completely wipes whatever tint there is, and now we see the person for who they are. We start to live with them. We start to experience, the odd habits and the things that drive us up the pole, and so then all of a sudden it's like, oh God, this is terrible. But now, again, we blame that person because they've changed, right? We don't recognize that it is in fact our ideals that were distorted from the very beginning. So we blame them for not fulfilling our fantasies and expectations. So if you want to check this out again, go on to SLAA. If you Google it, SLAA, you'll find symptoms of sex and love addiction, or characteristics of it, and then you can look at if any of those resonate with you. If they do, then I invite you to read some of the other literature. You may not identify with all of them, but even if it's just one of them, the idea here isn't that you declare yourself a sex and love addict, or book yourself into a rehab for sex and love addiction. The idea here is to help us identify any sort of compulsive behavior, obsessive thinking, any version of addiction that's present in our lives, so that we can weed it out, right? Again, our objective is to draw closer to Allah, and if any of these behaviors are present, then we have an opportunity here to root it out. So I'm mentioning this next one, which is the under-earning, because in our current climate we have huge unemployment, especially in South Africa, right? Now with COVID and that kind of thing, lockdown, it's only skyrocketing. People are losing jobs. People are talking about how they now can't work, and where they're going to find work, and when are they going to be let out of lockdown, and Like there are so many people in crisis. There are also lots of people making new money, and this is the difference. Right? There are those of us who will see an opportunity and go for it, and then there are those of us who will attribute our lack of finances to our circumstances. And I'm not saying circumstances don't play a role. The question is there a part of us that doesn't pursue our finances in a healthy way? Right? So I was surprised myself when I discovered what under-earning is. I had no idea that there was a whole fellowship around under-earning. But they've got some symptoms of under-earning here that I think is useful to mention, because I think that a lot of these are prevalent in our community, and we're potentially suffering simply because this is going undiagnosed. So the first one, time indifference. We put off what must be done and don't use our time to support our own vision and further our own goals. Simple thing like procrastination, right, is a version of time indifference. Idea deflection. We compulsively reject ideas that could expand our lives or careers and increase our profitability. So often especially if you discuss business ideas with people, they say, oh, you know what, here's what you could do. And then you go, no, I could probably do it. You have no intention of acting on it. You're just like entertaining them, hoping that it rushes the conversation if you agree with him, right? And so this idea deflection, we're not actually looking at, is there any way, in fact, to grow my business based on this person's idea? A compulsive need to prove. Although we have demonstrated competence in our jobs or businesses, we are driven by a need to reprove our worth and value. This one just keeps resurfacing. So you'll have lots of people already engaged in business, already with years and years experience, but because they've now, for instance, gone on their own, now all of a sudden they treat it as if their day one in their company is day one in their entire careers. All of a sudden they have no confidence. They have a need to have to prove themselves, and to this end they end up, let's say, giving away more of their service than they should. They may be over discounting or undercharging or not even invoicing at all, giving away their time for free. All is a way to prove value, but the need for it actually isn't there. Like in terms of the relationship, it's not there. It's an internal thing. Clinging to useless possessions, so holding on to possessions that no longer serve our needs, such as threadbare clothing or broken appliances. Generally, hoarders fall into this category. Like there's just so much junk we don't need, but we hold on to it because we see the world as a place of shortage, a place of lack. And so I can't let go of this thing. I need to save it for just in case I need spare parts, or just in case I have a project, or just in case. You know, a guy like that, then it might be useful to, might be useful to give this list a look over and see if this is something that they're struggling with. Exertion or exhaustion. We habitually overwork, then become exhausted, then underwork or cease work completely. Right? So there isn't that healthy balance. There's an overwork and then an underwork. Overwork and underwork. It's much like the binging and purging in eating or in porn. Right? Giving away our time. We compulsively volunteer for various causes or give away our services without charge when there's no clear benefit. And here's a distinction. There's a difference when it comes to being of service and you understand why you're doing it and how it might benefit you, even if it's just on a spiritual level. Right? So there's still clear benefit. But there are other times when we just do for others as a way of being busy, or as a way of not focusing on ourselves. And that is compulsive. It's really an avoidance of dealing with our life. That's giving away our time. Undervaluing and underpricing. We undervalue our abilities and service and fear asking for increases in compensation or for what the market will be. Sometimes we're charging too little when we don't need to. We just think that, no, we need to establish ourselves, or we need to get people to know who we are or whatever. But, the reality is that that isn't cost-free. We are in fact bearing the cost of that. with our time, with our efforts, with our energy, all of those come at a cost. Isolation. We choose to work alone when it might serve us better to have co-workers, associates, or employees. So that ties into the whole idea of being self-sufficient, right? And how that is in fact one of the principles or the obstacles that cause us to resist recovery. Because when we're self-sufficient, then we don't want to reach out, we don't share, we don't want to ask for help or anything like that. Physical ailments. Sometimes out of fear of being large or exposed, we experience physical ailments. And so, like tension headaches, for instance, like all of a sudden we're dizzy or we're nauseous or we get like irritable bowel syndrome because, we're anxious about being out there performing. Misplaced guilt or shame. We feel uneasy when asking for or being given what we need or what we are owed. So we may do work, but then just never invoice for it because we feel guilty about asking for what we are owed. And we didn't even do anything wrong, right? It's just a misplaced guilt. Not following up. We don't follow up on opportunities, leads, or jobs that could be profitable. We begin many projects and tasks, but often do not complete them. Right? This first part of it is crucial. I did work for an organization once, and they wanted to find out why people were signing up with them. And so they asked some of their clients, look, why did you sign up with us? The answer, because you answered the phone. I've asked around so many places, no one gets back to me. So you're the only one that answered, so I signed up with you. It had nothing to do with the product, had nothing to do with the quality of the service, had nothing to do with anything other than the fact that they responded. So sometimes we have ideas about how hard sales are going to be or how difficult it is to market and whatever. And really what we need to do is just the simple thing of following up, following through, doing the next thing that's needed. Stability boredom. We create unnecessary conflict with co-workers, supervisors, and clients, generating problems that result in financial distress. So these are some of the symptoms of under-earning. If you find that you experience any of these things, then one of the things that you can do is go onto the website. For all of these addictions, be it substance or process, and for all of the sites that I'm referring to you, I'm referring them to you because they have resources, they have readings, they have literature for you to help understand what it is that you're going through, what the next step forward might be, what the toolkit is that you could use. So for instance, here we discussed time indifference. We also discussed financial instability. So in terms of the toolkits, for instance, on Under Earners Anonymous, there's like a time log, so that you can see, okay, how am I using my time? You could even develop things like if your symptom was number 11, not following up with people, then like a sales funnel, looking at each stage of the funnel. Have I contacted those? Do I know what's the next step with people, etc., etc., etc. So I'm doing this because, again, this doesn't need to necessarily be this huge mental exercise. A huge part of recovery is simply doing the thing that needs to be done. So we ask Allah to make it easy for us, to grant us insight and understanding into our behaviors and into our dysfunction, and that more than anything He grants us the ability and the tawfiq to act upon, to do the next best thing, to do the right thing, to do what needs to be done in order for us to get healthy. With that, I invite you to ask any questions on any of the content that we've covered thus far. Again, I request that you like, share and subscribe to the videos, and invite other people to view them, invite people to DTI's page. There's so many other programs that are happening currently in Ramadan, so the reward is there for the picking. If you need to get hold of me, feel free to WhatsApp me on 084 8878681. That's 084 8878681, or Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of them at Coach Hanika. You can shoot me a message there, or you can email me, coach@ridwanhanika.com. In the next couple of segments, I'll be looking more at some of the answers that have come through, or questions that have come through, and me actually answering them. So with that, I bid you Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh wa alhamdulillah.